We are so gay on this episode. I'm even calling you honey. Next thing you know, I'm going to be saying Miss Vanjie.
Vanjie.
Miss Vanjie.
Daylight won't stop flashing lights. Feels like 1,000 years have gone by without you. I miss someone like you, but wanna tell you some things.
Hey, everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
I'm Steve Morey.
And we're going to do a very different, a very special episode this time around. We don't have Brother Brian, but we do have returning to the show for the first time in way too long, our friend Chris Cummins.
That's not my name. Oh, wait, it totally is.
Well, gee, Chris, why are you here?
I'm here to discuss the Carrie the Musical episode, otherwise known as A Night to Remember, of Riverdale.
Okay, and we're going to be discussing it with you. And if you didn't watch it, I think it's safe to assume that all of us are in agreement that that was probably the gayest hour of broadcast television ever.
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
Oh, man, oh,
Yeah.
man, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. Like, that thing could turn you gay, that hour.
Yeah. I think I've seen some episodes of World's Strongest Man that are gayer.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I'm going to start right with the Archie. Well, Chris, let's go dial it back a little bit and just tell us about how much, for people who maybe did not hear your earlier appearances or are familiar with your work online, of how deeply you love the Archieverse.
Yeah, Archie Comics are pretty much my favorite thing in the world. I've been reading them since 1982. I've had the absolute pleasure and honor of working with Archie a little bit, doing some introductions, like in the book Archie's Favorite High School Comics, and Archie's Favorite Comics from the Vaults. And I've also done some intros for their Josie and the Pussycats standalone issues. And Archie Comics to me are just so exciting and so much fun because they've really changed with the times. And like the past 10 to 12 years, we've really been in this like Archie renaissance where like the old Archie, it's still there, but like they've really begun doing some really amazing stuff. And it all kind of began with the introduction of Kevin Keller, Riverdale's first openly gay character. And from there, like the floodgates were open, and it's just this tidal wave of creativity that has been going on within the company. So to be a longtime fan of Archie, to be where we are now, where I get to watch the show every week, it's amazing. I never thought it would happen. I think I used this line when I appeared on here last, but I wish I could go back in time and tell like 13-year-old me, like, hey, it gets better. Because for me, this is the it gets better. Like, like I wish I had a gay Archie character, you know, when I was like a young gay reading these comics. You know, it's just fantastic. And you know, the old comics are still classic, and you can still get the old stories in the regular supermarket digests. But they're doing some really great stuff with the new stories now as well. And it's just it's so exciting to have a show on like this that has like an openly gay creator, and to have you know, this show just has a crazy great queer aesthetic every week. And I mean, last night it was a new milestone for this show. And as someone who, you know, as someone who likes interesting failures like Carrie the Musical, to have that incorporated with just the whole strangeness that is Riverdale was kind of a dream come true. I've watched the episode at least 6 times at this point. And yeah, I'm vaguely obsessed. So it's a thrill to be on here tonight.
Okay, you've mentioned the show, so why don't you tell us, pretend that we're actually pitching this to the CW, what is Riverdale, for the 2 or 3 people who are uninformed?
Sure. Riverdale is kind of a dark, twisted, adult, very sexy take on these classic Archie comic characters. You know, I believe it was pitched as Archie meets Twin Peaks, which is a very, very accurate way to describe this show. There's death on the show, there's sex on the show. There's weirdness, although not nearly enough weirdness for my tastes. Every now and then the show does something incredibly strange. Like earlier this season, they kept mentioning the fact that Betty's sister is in a cult, but they didn't really do anything with that. So the show has a possibility for being stranger and weirder, but it's already like a pretty non-traditional take on these Archie characters. If you're expecting it to be like, you know, the love triangle between Betty, Archie, and Veronica, and having, you know, milkshakes at the chocolate shop, it's not so much there. The chocolate shop is still there. These characters are still there. Milkshakes are still there. But milkshakes are more likely to be thrown at main characters than enjoyed by them. So, yeah, it's a very kind of non-traditional take on Archie and these characters who were considered milquetoast by some audiences, but no, these kids are great. Well, look, I mean, I never agreed with that. Even the Al Hartley religious comics, which I will die on the hill that says they're the reason why Archie got a bad reputation for so long. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, there was this Archie artist named Al Hartley who licensed the Archie characters to be the stars of religious comic books, and it didn't go so well.
But it did give us Jesus Freak Betty, which is sublime.
Yeah. I'm sure in the program notes there'll be links to things discussing what we're talking about. But yeah, so when the show came on, it was really strange and not what you'd expect.
So now we flash forward to last night, April 18th, 2018, with a show presented within the episode, the Riverdale High School version of Carrie the Musical. It seems that you went very much in depth in a recent article in Tab of Geek, so you did my job for me about Carrie the Musical. I will be able to interject here later because I did work in the Business End of Broadway Theater, not at the time of Carrie, but close enough in time where I met some of the people who were involved in the production, and there's some things I can say. But why don't you tell us about, in a pretty much targeted, concise manner, what is Carrie the Musical?
The screenwriter of the movie, Lawrence D. Cohen, he in the early 80s, he had seen this opera while just out one night, and a lot of the themes resonated with him, and he kind of thought, this reminds me a lot of the story of Carrie. So he teamed up with Dean Pitchford and Michael Gore, who at the time were having huge success for writing some of the songs for Fame. And together the guys workshopped this musical based on Carrie. And the workshop happened in 1984. They did the process of revising and trying to get financiers and backing and everything. And eventually this led to the Royal Shakespeare Company, who wound up being the co-producer of the play. And in 1988, they did basically like a month-long dry run of this Carrie the Musical. And it had some problems. At one point, the actress Barbara Cook, who played Margaret White in the show, she was almost decapitated at one point, and due to a set malfunction. But they got all the kinks ironed out. After the month-long tryout, it was ready for Broadway. Other interesting things about the show are Darlene Love played the gym teacher. Debbie Allen Realness, did the choreography, and one of the stars playing Billy was Gene Anthony Ray from Fame. So if there are Fame fans out there, there's tons of connections between Fame and Carrie the Musical. So Carrie the Musical does 16 preview productions, and it has opening night, and the critics destroy it. It is considered to be laughably bad. Word of mouth is in fact so terrible. Despite brisk initial sales, the financial backing drops out, and the show is forced to close after only 5 regular performances. And it kind of becomes like that thing that was with Howard the Duck. It kind of takes on a life of its own because of its failure. it becomes this kind of punchline of notoriety, even though many people aren't familiar with the source material. So over the years, a cult audience develops for it. And, I remember going to comic book shows as early as like 1989, 1990. And a staple on the tape trading table was always like Carrie the Musical.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really know too much about that. I wasn't really exposed to it until I guess it was like the early days of either Napster or YouTube that I saw it, and I heard a few of the songs, but I didn't really think too much about it. So this audience this cult audience was growing and growing and growing, and then once the internet became commonplace, the fan thing kind of took off. I remember there was a great website named it was run by a guy named Vinny Rotoli, and he was always talking about the Carrie musical, and that was a lot of fun, and that's kind of where I learned about it a lot on. And this cult grew, and then eventually in 2012 it premiered off Broadway. This time it was kind of a success, and since then performances of it have been staged, in different countries, and it's now even available to be licensed as a high school show, which kind of brings us to Riverdale.
I have to tell you that I was one of those people that did have a Carrie bootleg as early as the summer of 1989.
Nice.
Actually, the person I watched the episode with last night was my friend Karen Babiak, and she actually saw Carrie the Musical.
Oh.
And upon leaving Carrie the Musical, she met Debbie Allen, who implored her, please come back because they're going to close our ass. And the bootlegs that were out, you got a framework of the show, and it's taken some different turns. There was a scene with pig slaughter. If you read the descriptions of how that was staged, it will just blow your mind.
And that's my preferred version, I should say, is the initial weirdo version that no longer exists, is my still preferred version. And all that stuff is still on YouTube if you dig enough.
The recording that we were searching for so viciously at one point there was a rumor that there was a recording of the original Backers Audition Workshop, which had a completely different cast, with Annie Golden from the Shirts, who played Carrie, Maureen McGovern, who played the mother. I think they were going for a grease feel because at that time Annie Golden was 34 years old. And there was a rumor that was somewhere out there. If people ever go into the history of bootlegs, you have to understand that there was a rabid cult of people that were tape trading and in certain instances creating vinyl over Broadway shows that didn't last long enough to make a cast recording, or movies that never put out an official soundtrack. You see that especially with some of the later MGM musical movies in the late 50s. Boy, this is gay, this episode. So
I was absolutely a part of that underground tape trading world, though. Yeah.
Bootleg recordings does not just mean rock. Like 98.7% of it is, but there is a cult of interest that goes for something a little different. Oh, boy, I have very fond memories in a sense of working with people who were part of Carrie during its brief Broadway run. And there was, I don't want to call people out because I'm Facebook friends with two of them, and I don't want to let some cats out of the bag, but it was a very chaotic production, to say the least. And revisions were flying. You can even hear that on the bootleg recordings, like what you have at the beginning of the Royal Shakespeare Company production, and then what actually played on Broadway. There's substantial changes, and that's not uncommon for most musicals. Even smash hit musicals gestate, and the purpose of previews is to see what works and what doesn't, to have a very tight show at the end.
I think the most interesting thing about Carrie, my favorite song is "In," which is the show opener and also the first song that was done on Riverdale last night.
Yeah.
And the initial versions of that it's basically like an aerobics, like it's like listening to like something off of just to make it even gayer, the Richard Simmons Reach album.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say I'm not saying anything about Richard Simmons' sexual orientation, to be very clear.
Mm-hmm.
But his Reach album is very like one more, two more, come on, hit the floor. Very like aerobics driven, and that's how the song "In" initially was with Darlene Love's like driving of the girls to get physically fit and everything. And that early version of In is so wildly different than the version that exists now. It's mind blowing.
In pumps. The gym
Yeah,
teacher in
that's
pumps.
pretty much it. It's
Yeah.
crazy to listen to.
And just around the Broadway community, again, I worked in the business end of Broadway theater from 1991 to 1994. Carrie was one of those things that was close to a bar fight for some people, because the people who loved it. The people who hated it, it was palpable. You could tell, when people would describe their experience seeing Carrie, that it was 2 hours and 10 minutes that they really wanted back from their life.
Yeah.
And, even the accounts of how the reactions were among those preview audiences and those 5 actual performances, there were people from the balcony booing before the last number was finished, yet there were people starting an ovation within the first 5 rows. Betty Buckley and the woman who played, well, at that point, girl who had played Carrie, Lindsay Hadley, they basically got pretty good notices. They survived unscathed, I would say, but it's a very strange animal, because I think even the harshest critics of Carrie the Musical will acknowledge that there are moments of that show that do work. There are songs in that show that are wonderful, and some where where your tongue just drops, like, what in fuck were they thinking? Also, from a collector's standpoint, T-shirts, mugs, it wasn't a thing like now where even a bomb musical will have a lobby full of swag. There was very little official merchandise. There was the playbill, there was the placard, there was a T-shirt, and there was a mug that I don't even think was distributed to the general public. And these were very hotly sought-after items within theater goers, the cult theater goers that were part of that particular community. So I have a fondness for hearing about Carrie. I was just too late. I was still in college when the show happened. And when they announced it, I thought, well, hey, I'm going to see it in the summer. That didn't happen. Yeah. I did see Legs Diamond, though. Which we can talk about another time, which is a Broadway show that was a bomb that nobody has fond memories of. But that's another time. Again, this is a very gay show.
We'll do a spin-off where we talk about that, Moose Murders, and Via Galactica.
Oh my God!
I'm also vaguely obsessed with.
Well,
another Fame connection.
Probably I did see a show on Broadway that never premiered, Face Value, the Henry David Wang that closed in previews. And I did see 2 of the 4 performances and 3 previews of The Rise and Fall of Little Voice, which got the worst reviews you could imagine, and to this day is one of my favorite theatrical experiences. It later made the movie of it was a hit in London, and they later made the movie Little Voice from that.
And I've seen a play version of it.
Yeah. Well, oh my God, there's Steve. I don't want to leave you out. Yeah, Steve, why don't you just...
Theater nerds can just go ahead and keep talking. I'll just be over here listening.
Well, from what we've discussed so far, is there anything you want to interject before we get to the episode?
It just sounds stupid. No, the thing is, I had no idea that Carrie the Musical existed before it was announced that they were going to be doing that as part of this show. And so, I done a little bit of reading. I looked it up. I read the history on the, the original performances up to Broadway and how it was mostly reviled, definitely a flop, but that it had some silver linings here and there. Obviously, the 2 leads did get, I think, nominated for some awards after that first season. Well, I mean, the only season. I think what's really interesting is that for this type of musical, I mean, the fact that this musical exists is just a shocker to me. But when it was revived in the mid-2010s, like, it seems like it would be a perfect fit with, what's coming from off-Broadway, what's really popular. I mean, we're well past the era of sort of like punk-style musicals and, non-traditional off-Broadway type performances. And so this fits right in with that. I mean, it's based on a horror movie, based on a horror novel. There's not a lot out there, and it's a musical. We've had Evil Dead the musical that's been popular in off-Broadway and touring shows for, oh gosh, how long has it been around? At least 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this type of show seems to fit right in. The fact that it can be optioned for high schools is perfect, because I know a lot of students the original novel came out in the 70s. The original film, I think, was it 78?
76. It was a very quick transition from book to film. The book came out in 74. The film was out in the public by 76.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking like the 70s. So the people who are optioning this for high school, the target audience for Riverdale would not have even been alive. Their parents might not have been alive.
Yeah.
When the original film came out, and obviously for the musical when it was originally released, none of these kids have been were alive at that point, but it just seems to fit. It's very cynical. It focuses on bullying in a very very direct way, religious fanaticism, parental control. Themes that are I'd say pretty universal, and would be perfect for a lot of high schools to put on, the ones that could get away with it, because obviously if Carrie White eats shit is not exactly something that you can get away with in most high school productions, but it's got good music, it's catchy, you can have a lot of fun with a lot of thrift store costume buying, and the show itself, or at least the themes of the show itself, are perfect for a lot of high schools nowadays. The type of revenge. It's kind of a revenge fantasy. So clearly, I know a lot of people, especially after Parkland, might have an issue with it trying to put it on in high school now.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely really strikes a chord, I would think, for a lot of people in the high school experience. And maybe that's maybe that's how they should have marketed it in the first place. Instead of trying to make this big Broadway production, maybe they should have gone on a tour first. Maybe they, done
the thing is, though, that climate did not exist, and it ebbs and flows when you do have the opportunity to do that. If anything, I think the show would have had a bigger chance off Broadway.
Exactly.
When you think of things like Little Shop of Horrors, which preceded it by 6 years, which is twisted in its own way, much more conventional show, but has its moments.
It is a musical about a giant carnivorous talking plant.
Yeah.
And there's also a sadistic, nitrous addicted dentist. I mean, there's a lot of
yeah. So it did seem to me that this was a show that may have been better suited for an off-Broadway audience, because it's not the same now, but at the time you could develop an audience over time, and just try to hang in there for a month till word of mouth kicked in. I think with off-Broadway, especially then with the price differential, people were willing to take a chance on. Okay, let me tell you this: I saw Little Shop of Horrors about 7 months after it came out. My full price ticket was $12.50.
Wow.
Now Broadway's cheaper too, but that's what you were looking at, and I just think from an economic perspective, in any whatever translation you could provide with inflation, you're willing to take a chance on something that costs less than something that is more expensive, especially if the word of mouth is as diverse as what was happening here.
Well, and also like fringe festivals. This would be perfect for a kind of a fringe fest. I mean,
I would have to disagree with that, because I think even at that point the names were too big.
I mean, the way that they were trying to build the show.
And I'm not saying you can still have, man. I saw a Pete Townsend musical that was effectively part of a Fringe festival only 7 years ago. So I'm not going to completely dismiss your point, but I think you do get the complication when you do have people, even if the track record isn't necessarily in that specific medium, like the case of the people who did the score and also Debbie Allen. And luckily, Debbie Allen later went on to direct some seriously legit stuff like the revival of Sweet Charity. It's a little they're already in the majors and not in the indies.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
And
also
maybe that
feel
was their
like
mistake from the
Yeah.
get go. Like maybe they shouldn't have even tried to punch up at that high. They should have really focused on keeping it small, culty.
Mhm.
Growing that audience, growing that fringe or indie audience who will then bolster out the seats if it ever makes it to Broadway. Makes
Mhm.
it on to actual Broadway. But they lived,
I
they
also
learned,
feel
they failed, and now it's back. But let's get to the episode because I think that's why we're all here.
So there's nobody better suited to give the episode synopsis than you, Chris. So let's hand it over to
okay.
you. Unless there's something
Um,
else you want to interject before we get on to that.
No, I just think like if there's a problem with the original production of Carrie the Musical, it's that I think everyone took it a little bit too seriously, and they didn't realize that it's a little goofy to be making a musical out of this, and I think they were going for high art instead of camp. And I think the pendulum has swung around the other way at this point, as this episode illustrates.
Oh yeah,
Because
and I think
ooh,
Steve made some very good.
absolutely, yeah.
We're in a climate now that a punk rock musical ran 422 performances on Broadway.
Yeah,
With American
it's crazy.
Idiot. It's a very different climate now. Chris, let's go over to the
Okay.
episode. Tell us about, and what was the actual name of the episode?
It was called A Night to Remember.
Okay,
It is I believe it's the 31st overall episode of Riverdale. And so basically, Kevin Keller is directing the high school musical for the year at Riverdale, which is Carrie the Musical. And, so it begins with a musical performance where everyone's learning their lines and everything. But the basic, narrative thrust of the episode is the production of this episode. But there are a few other things that are happening throughout the episode. Over the past few weeks, Archie has been a real dick to his dad because he's been getting further involved with Veronica's father, Hiram Lodge, who, in my opinion, is the worst character on TV right now. I absolutely hate this character. But anyway,
Can I just also say, prior to the addition of Hiram Lodge, I would have made the case that Riverdale was one of the best cast shows out there.
yeah.
Mark Consuelos, if I can once again pull one of those Katrina Longworthisms, sucks. He's outacted by people who were 27 years younger than him. He has no reason being on the show. Someone must have lost a bet. He's awful. Chris, I know you basically agree with me on this.
Absolutely agree with you.
Steve, do you like him?
I disagree. I think that he's the heart and soul of the show. That without him, the entire cast, and in fact, the entire series just falls apart.
I'll just say this about Hiram, and then I'll
for his performances.
like Hiram, the fact that he's been given so much screen time is like characters like Kevin and Josie this season have had to take, and Cheryl too until recently, have had to take a back seat because it's been the Hiram and Archie show. And I appreciate that the show's tried to give Archie a lot more to do this season. I do, but Hiram is a dead end, and I really, really hope they kill him off by the season's end. I don't think they're going to, but I hope they do. But anyway, so one of the things that's happening is a few episodes back, Hiram bought Archie a car, and Archie was keeping it secret from his dad, and Hiram basically came in while Fred Andrews was building the sets for the Carrie musical, and basically, it became like a dick measuring contest to say, like, hey, Archie really cares about me soon, and this was kind of, this, as well as by playing the part of Tommy in Carrie the Musical, Archie realized that he's been on a dark path of late, and he stood up to Mr. Lodge, and he gave him back the car keys, and he basically said, don't ever come between me and my dad again, which led to my favorite moment that has happened yet on the show, and one of the most ridiculous things to happen on a very ridiculous show is Archie goes out and buys this 1930s jalopy, which is the car he would ride in the comics for decades. And it's so ridiculous to include this in the show. It's such a nod to the fans who, most people watching Riverdale don't care about the comics. And certainly there aren't as many weirdos as I am who are hardcore comic guys like watching this show as I do. So to me, that was like a gift that I lost my damn mind when Archie unveiled this tarp, and there is his old crappy jalopy from the comics. That was like what he was riding around in 1942.
Yeah,
Other
I
things
would
that
have to
happened,
agree with you, Chris. I thought that was a delight.
It was I was losing my mind. I couldn't believe they went there, and like I love.
I thought it was going to be like an 82 Dodge Dart or something,
Sure.
but one constant from classic Archie was his car always breaking down.
Yes.
And it was good to see that there was a hat tip to that.
And like Fred said jalopy earlier in the episode, and I thought that's all we're going to get. And like you, Bill, I thought it was going to be like an old car, but like you said, like an 80s car. So when that actually happened, wow. But a few other things happened in this episode that were interesting. There's been a lot of tension between Veronica and Betty and Archie and Jughead over the past couple of weeks. And through the magic of song, that all got wrapped up this week because, without going into like completely going through the past like 6 weeks of shows, they've all been divided basically because of things that Hiram Lodge is doing. So the main cast kind of all came together, and Veronica and Betty made up while singing the song You Shine, and also conveniently through the power of song, Josie, who was turned off by the actions of Cheryl Blossom. Cheryl Blossom had a big crush on Josie, and she decided to show it by basically sending her a was it a pig's heart? Was it a pig's heart? I think it may have been a pig's heart, foreshadowing Carrie.
We were trying to remember where that comes from because there's so many moving parts this season.
Yeah.
That it really is hard to keep track. For some reason, I thought that Cheryl had some involvement with tipping off the relationship between Josie's mother and Sheriff Keller. I thought that's where that came. But like you said, it's really hard to track. At the very least, there was like a heart thing happening after Cheryl starts getting in touch with her same-sex feelings.
So again, though, through the magic of song, they patched it all up, and their song was "Unsuspecting Hearts." And what I like about this is last night's episode did some serious course correcting. Because there were these plot lines that were dragging on a little bit too much, and we're less than a month away from the finale at this point. So shit needs to start being wrapped up. Now on other, if it was a non-musical episode and they wrapped things up so tidily, I would be like, this is a contrivance. This is just them relying on convenient plot points and everything. I mean, and it still kind of is all of that. But damn it, if it didn't work by using those songs to represent what the characters were feeling in the context of Riverdale itself. And I thought that was really well done. It was still extraordinarily convenient that like a lot of the tensions between these characters were wrapped up through the production of this musical, but it also super worked well in the framework of the episode last night. So I have no problem with that. Cheryl wants to be Carrie White in the show, and there's been a lot of stuff happening with Cheryl and her mother Penelope, including Cheryl being sent to a nunnery to get gay conversion therapy, in which Veronica Kevin and Tony Topaz busted her out a few weeks back. So Cheryl's mom refuses to let Cheryl be Carrie in the musical, which is good because around the same time this is all happening, the Black Hood or someone posing as the Black Hood is sending letters to Kevin saying you have to recast Cheryl or there will be consequences.
Right. And just for people who may not be aware, the Black Hood is a serial killer that factored in earlier in the series.
Because the series, when it gets weird, it is very weird, and it needs to do more of that. And we're on the way now, but more of that in a second. So Moose's girlfriend, and I'll put air quotes around girlfriend because Moose's sexuality is very fluid on the show at this point. Midge takes the lead as Carrie, and there's the night a night we'll never forget, and everyone's preparing for the big opening of the show. And meanwhile, Carrie drenches herself in what is presumably pig's blood and goes to her mother and demands emancipation and that she gets protection over her beloved grandmother and that she gets the house that her mother and uncle is living in, which leads to Bill's favorite line of the night. Bill?
Nightmare child, what do you want? I've said that too many times in the last 21 hours.
Natalie Bolt is so wonderful.
Scene,
yeah.
that scene right there where she's covered in pig's blood and she's got the candles and she's explaining to her mother, exactly what her mother's been doing. Like, if you haven't, the greatest thing about this episode is that if you're someone like me and you're kind of a few weeks behind, this episode basically summarizes everything that's been happening the entire season. Puts it together, puts the plot points out there, ties them up in a bow, like you mentioned, Chris, and then you're left to enjoy the music, the musical numbers and what role they play. But that scene, it's a really short scene ultimately, but she comes in with the pink satin prom dress, the Carrie prom dress, covered in blood with the candelabra. And it's like, mother, it's just incredible. If you touch one hair on grandmother's head.
I don't understand why more drag queens aren't dressing up like Cheryl Blossom. I really don't understand this at this point.
You have to be super pale. I'm guessing, if you're watching the current season of Drag Race, probably Miss Cracker or Aquaria might be able to pull one of this, a Cheryl Blossom off. But, man...
She's such a fantastic character.
She's riveting on screen.
So basically, this all leads into, there's some other little brief nonsense that goes on about, is Ethel the one who's actually writing the letters, and there's a very confusing moment towards the end where Kevin Keller walks in on Fangs Fogarty, who is a Southside Serpent, who seems to be hitting on Midge, but we don't quite know because we don't really know anything about the Fangs character other than he seems to have a crush on Kevin as well, but we don't know. And Moose seems pissed off by this. You'll notice I haven't mentioned Jughead at all because he doesn't really do anything in this episode. He's the documentarian, which is basically just an excuse to not have him sing or do his narration. Which, I think this episode kind of proved that you don't really need Jughead's narration.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. So this all leads to, on stage, Margaret White, played by Alice Cooper, which is just amazing in the context of the show.
And correct me if I'm wrong, when they revealed the casting, they actually posted a cast list when they announced the episode. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
One of the fun things, Playbill actually put up on Playbill.com, you can download your own Riverdale Carrie the Musical Playbill, which is a lot of fun. His bios for the cast and everything, just like a regular Playbill. So that's kind of great. So we're at Margaret White, a.k.a. Alice Cooper, who earlier in the episode has rekindled her love with husband Hal Cooper, who's probably the Black Hood. That's my guess. So they're reconciled, and she is singing the song Evening Prayers, and she turns around, and there is Carrie, a.k.a. Midge, basically with scissors through her, basically holding her up onto a wall, and there's a note scrawled in blood that basically says, "The Black Hood is back. Everyone who escaped him before will die." And chaos happens throughout the theater. Everyone runs and screaming. Creepy chick, Betty's brother, just sits in his seat because he's a creep. And that is cut to black. That is the end of the episode. And all hell breaks loose, and it is wonderful. And it also works in the show because you knew they weren't probably going to do the destruction sequence from Carrie since Cheryl Blossom was Carrie. They're not going to do that with a nothing character like Midge. So what do instead? They kill Midge. Spoiler alert. And it's,
but is she dead? Is she actually dead? Maybe she's just slightly unconscious, bleeding out.
Well,
still alive.
I actually think it would be great because they made you think she was dead already once this season. So I think it would be great if they just keep making you think she's dead and she isn't. Poor
Midge. First she was almost a jingle jangle casualty, and now
right.
Poor girl.
Yeah, it's terrible. And it is kind of disservice to the comic book character, but at the same time they did kind of start redeeming Chuck Clayton last night, which was great. Yeah. So that's basically the Riverdale Carrie the Musical episode in a very, very truncated nutshell. But you're really even if you don't watch Riverdale, you should watch this episode because the production and the choreography, especially, like, I love the choreography for In, where they run into the school auditorium all excitedly and start doing this wacky dance in the chairs. It's wonderful. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, so I guess should we talk about our favorite moments from the episode, Bill, or?
Oh, sure, if you want to do that, that's fine. I was planning to throw it over to Steve to just see if there was anything Steve wanted to add before we went on to something like that. But yeah, sure, we can talk about our favorite bits. So I'll throw it over to Steve. Steve, what was your favorite bit from the show?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Alice Cooper and her portrayal of Carrie's mom, because somehow she is able to redeem one of the most horrific characters of modern American literature. Mrs. White is an absolutely vile human being through her paranoia and her religious fanaticism and her abuse of Carrie and manipulation. I mean, she's a horrible person. But Alice Cooper getting up there and singing, about her fears for Carrie. I forget the name of the song. If you've got the song list near you, you could probably say it. It was surprising because she's singing it to Betty as an apology for everything that she's done and she said, and she's, because she has herself as a character manipulated Betty and her friends and basically everything that's been going on around the family and has been driving people away. And that's what kind of leads to the to her husband coming back, to Hal coming back, and her trying to make amends with Chick, and of course with Skeet Ulrich's character, who plays Jughead's dad, who I believe did they confirm that Chick is his son?
No.
Okay.
No. I think Chick is the son of the Black Hood.
I absolutely think that as well. And I think he's also in cahoots with the Black Hood, which is why he sat there all creepy, and which is also why he showed up backstage right beforehand. I think he was in on the murder of Midge.
Yeah.
Chick has always been just like a really wrong character. I mean, you can't have somebody just be that creepy and not have it be for a reason. I mean, even in the show, which is, the red herrings of all the red herrings, for almost everything that happens. I mean, there is something to be said about a clearly sinister character making, opportune appearances around tragic events. But same thing with Cheryl's uncle, who's her father's identical twin, who also mysteriously shows up and it goes in cahoots with her mom. Anyway. But I think that whole scene with Alice Cooper, because she's who's the actress who plays her? Not Gretchen Mol.
What, you talking about Alice Cooper? Match-Mick?
Match-Mick. She's been pretty vile. I mean, she's kind of been one of my least favorite characters of the past couple of seasons. But with her performance last night, I felt sorry for her.
She's one of my favorite characters because the complexities never seem to end with her.
No, she's got secrets within secrets. I mean, like she's got more dimensions than a housewife from Beverly Hills or.
And I especially love that they never tampered with her name.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No. Not at all.
Can I share my quick Black Hood theory?
Sure.
I think because Riverdale is a show where they always make you think the most obvious answer is going to be that answer, and then it isn't. I think it's not going to be Hal Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Black Hood is actually going to be someone who we've seen on the show already, but not important enough a character. Someone who had an involvement with Alice in her Serpent days, and I think that person is none other than Tall Boy, the Serpent. And I think Chick is going to be his kid, and he's going to be the Black Hood, because we haven't seen him since he left with Penny Peabody, which is a while ago. So I have a feeling it's going to be that, or the dude who was roughing up Chick with the woman who was like the shady guy's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, these character names, they get to me after a while. So I think, but I do think that Hal may possibly die. Protecting like Betty from the Black Hood or something like that may happen, but yeah. But the thing that blows that theory out of the water is the Black Hood clearly has a connection with Betty, so that kind of throws that theory out into the garbage. But it would be interesting
could it be Betty's sister? You notice that she's not around anytime the Black Hood is around. I mean, she hasn't been around, period, this whole season.
It could be someone involved in the mysterious cult that I wish they'd talk about more.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can cut all that if you want.
Don't worry about it. No, that's fine. That's fine. Speculation is always fun. Comic books, speculation. So, Chris, what was your favorite part?
Oh, man. Pure fandom alone, it was the scene with Archie and the jalopy.
Mm-hmm.
That was just fantastic. But I really I didn't know how they were going to do the musical sequence, and I think the best way that they did it is just right out of the gate with that opening sequence, because Riverdale already lives in like this heightened magical realism type area, and to throw in the musical numbers, it worked beautifully, and I love that. I just think that song is so perfect to begin with. And I love that song. So I would say the jalopy scene, and then the performance of Van. But there really wasn't anything I disliked about this episode. And again, I have watched this episode a lot. So
I think to the point you need to take a break.
Yeah, this is the last I will be talking about it for a while, because basically for the past 2 weeks, it's been like the focus of my work, which is very weird. I've written a lot about Carrie and the show and this episode, and I'm ready to take a break right now.
Okay, we've already mentioned my favorite moment in the show, which again was Nightmare Child. What do you want from me? A close second was when Cheryl referred to the goings-on with the letters from the Black Hood as thespian terrorism. But for what really was one of my favorite moments was Camila Mendes was born to sing The World According to Chris.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought that sequence, however brief it was, and I was very glad, and we can talk about this a little later, thank you to Water Tower Music. It's just a snippet of the actual song, but it just works so perfectly. Now, I also have a question, because you will know this, Chris. The actual actors did all the vocals, correct?
They did. I think, you know what? And I really question how much certain things have been touched up. I think Archie's vocals, which I think we're all probably in agreement with, were the worst.
Yeah.
Well,
they were just plain.
Yeah. All of the actors are credited as doing their own singing on the Water Tower release of the soundtrack. So, yeah, I mean, I question how much, studio trickery was actually done in there, but only KJ Appa really sounds auto-tuned to me.
Are there plans for a physical release of the soundtrack?
Yes.
Okay.
There are. It's going to be an Urban Outfitters exclusive. Early July it comes out on blood red vinyl.
Awesome.
I will be buying the hell out of that. Yeah.
I was pretty confident about that because Water Tower has a very consistent history of, at least in limited releases, putting out physical versions of their material, especially if they're esoteric material like this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I absolutely think that what's going to happen, given that, Riverdale just keeps becoming more and more popular, is what you're going to see is high schools are going to start doing more productions of Carrie the Musical. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have another, off-Broadway production or something down the line at some point, or at least regionally, of this show, semi-professional, because, the interest, I think, is certainly out there. And I just noticed, obviously my social media feed is a little skewed, but I noticed a lot of people who weren't me or you or Steve were talking about that soundtrack today. And these are people who aren't necessarily fans of the show. Like my sister heard about it through Playbill.com, and she was asking me questions about it because she wasn't really familiar with. She knew I love Riverdale, but she didn't really know anything about the show, and she didn't know anything about Carrie, so I was telling her a little bit about it. So I think a high-profile episode like this is just going to have more fans of the source material. which is great. And I think that's kind of part of the intention of doing an episode like this.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to wrap this up. We'll take our curtain call, if we can borrow a theatrical term. And when we wrap up an episode of the Comic Book Bears, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment, which is where we signify something, be it a comic book or a television program or a film or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may enjoy sampling. We are nothing if not gracious to our guests, so I'm going to throw this over to Chris first. Chris, what is your Woof of the Week?
I'm actually going to keep it in the Archie universe here and say I'm really liking Jamie Lee Rotante's work on Betty and Veronica Vixens, which is a current Archie book, which basically has Betty and Veronica as like leaders of a biker gang, and it's a lot of fun.
How many issues in are they?
I want to say 5 or 6. They're about to start a new story arc.
Okay. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
Well, strangely enough, I'm going to bring up a phone game. It's actually out for Android and iPhone or Apple products called Marvel Strike Force. And if you're familiar with Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes or possibly DC Legends, they're all pretty much in the same vein. You collect different Marvel characters over the course of, finding their individual pieces. You power them up, you increase their abilities. It's basically just a massive collection game and a huge time sink. But it's fun. It's got great animation to it. You get a lot of a good mix of characters. And, of course, the usual junk characters like Ravager, Boomer, and whatever. But it is fun being able to play those, those types of games, and especially now that there's a big Marvel movie just around the corner. I think they've been hyping it up for the past 4 years. Avengers: Infinity War. Of course, now there's all the special characters that you can collect in different skins and things like that. So it's, it is at that. At a good time to jump on if you need something else to waste your life on, because it really has no redeeming value other than wasting lots of time. Please keep it free to play. Don't spend all of your money, because I know the temptation is real. But yeah, it's a fun little game, and it's a great way to kill 20 minutes here and there when you're bored.
Okay. Well, just as Chris kept his Woof of the Week within the Archieverse, I'm going to keep my Woof of the Week in the Carrieverse. And my Woof goes to a book that came out quite some time ago. Let me get the exact copyright date. 1991. My God, I've had this book with me for 27 years. This is a book called Not Since Carrie, 40 Years of Broadway Musical Flops by Ken Mendelbaum. The paperback and the hardcover are long out of print, but you can get the Kindle edition for just $7.99. And this presents a history up until 1990 of flops on Broadway. And it groups the different flops by the type of show there was. There were some that were by major writers who just didn't come up to the task. There were star flops, a section called Missed Opportunities, and my personal favorite section, Heartbreakers and Cream, which are shows that I think are fantastic shows like The Rink and Mac and Mabel. It is framed by Carrie. The first chapter details the first preview of Carrie, and then later on it's framed by a history of Carrie, which sandwiches the history of flops on Broadway. It's a very entertaining read. It's hysterical what star egos can do and kill a show. It's a very quick read, and I don't even think you have to be a musical aficionado to enjoy it. So this is where I'm going to send my woof to 40 Years of Broadway Musical Flops, the book Not Since Carrie by Ken Mendelbaum, which again is still in print via Kindle. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I was very glad that you had the opportunity to talk this up even more than you have been over the last 7 or 8 days. We really thank you for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. I always like being a guest on this.
Oh, fantastic. So again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears podcast. If you want to listen to us, you can do so by subscribing through iTunes or through our RSS feed or through Stitcher Radio. And if you want to reach out to us, you can always do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. So until next time, I'm Billy Z.
I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion, and we'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Woof!
Guess what? Ever since the world began, same plot, everyone's been dumping on their fellow man, pounding people they feel better than. I hope you're taking notes, cause you feel everyone deserves a shot. Get real, some of us have got it, girl, and some got squat. That's the truth, though, honey, like it or not. I hate to break it to you, my daddy taught me you get nowhere being nice. So now I'm sharing his advice. The world, according to Chris, is better to strike than get struck. Better to screw than get screwed. You'd probably think it's bizarre, and that's the way things are.
But that doesn't mean it has to be that way. What does it cost to be kind?
Ew, what have you done with my best friend?